my name is Matt Fawcett. I'm from the Carbon Co-op in Manchester. And basically, I'm here to talk about energy efficiency and smart grids. So Carbon Co-op is a community benefit society, so we're owned by our membership. We're basically a group of householders, so people who want to make really significant changes in the amount of carbon that their homes and that their lifestyles produce, basically. So in terms of the motivations of our membership, most of them motivated primarily by carbon savings, second by improvements to the comfort of their home. So a lot of them live at quite low temperatures because they're kind of your eco-freako sort of demographic. And then the last feature on that is the bill savings, which is kind of the reverse of what we're traditionally told from the kind of DEC perspective. So it's quite a niche group in some ways. So the group that we work with is basically innovators and the first of our early adopters, basically. So this is not a mass market program. It's trying to demonstrate what's possible in terms of carbon savings. So the amount of carbon that we look at saving when we do a retrofit of a conventional UK home is a 80% reduction in carbon. So that's to try and get us to the 80% reduction, which DEC have already agreed is what is necessary to avoid catastrophic climate change and all such things. So to kind of prove what's possible now. So in terms of this, when we look at cutting 80% of the carbon from a household, you have to look at it from a whole house approach. You can't just be, just doing your loft or just doing your windows, or you've got to look at everything in the house and how the whole house functions as a system, basically. So, as Damon was saying before, it's not all about the kind of external eco-bling. It's not the PV panels and all this kind of stuff. The stuff that we mainly concentrate on is the really quite boring fabric first, insulating the foundations, then doing external wall insulation quite thick, internal wall insulation if you've got something beautiful on the outside that you want to protect, then triple glazing, which you set inside the insulation itself, so that the thermal envelope around the property is as efficient as possible, basically. And they actually turn out looking quite nice in the end, which is, another feature that is important when you're looking at people's homes. So when we look at how it works, this is because of the kind of very committed nature of our membership. We're lucky to have people who come with a lot of data when they arrive in the project. So this is someone who has data for their energy usage for every day in the last 10 years. So which is quite a, from my point of view as a data geek, it's a great data set. So this is his gas use over the past 12 years, making changes in terms of doing that kind of gradual DIY installation and all this kind of stuff. And then that's the point when the Carbon Co-op retrofit happened. So it does work. It also meant that his house was a lot warmer. As I say, people are often living at quite low temperatures, at temperatures which we consider to be hazardous to health, and also, as Damon mentioned, at levels of humidity which have very, very negative health impacts. So, but how do we know what to do? So, and this is where the area of data comes in. So, we do a home assessment on your house. So this is based on something called SAP 2012, which is the standard assessment procedure for assessing properties. And this is a very, very time-consuming process. And for the consumer, it's a very costly process. We were charging about £500 or £600 for this, and it wasn't covering the architect's time to do it, basically. So we looked at ways where we could make that a faster process and make that a process that the end user and the homeowner had more control over. So I had this done in my house, and it was the third time I'd had someone come and do an assessment. I'd had an EPC done in the past. People might have had one of those, you know, where you're given this kind of a graph and your house is given a rating on it. But the problem was that I didn't have any of this data, so the next person who came to look at my house and assess it had to measure every wall, every window, the same as the previous person had. So it's a tremendous waste of time, and I also have no idea how the changes that I've made in my home, what impact those have actually had. So this is what we're trying to be able to communicate to people about the difference that certain measures that we take will have on their heating in their home. And the reason that, so what we came up with, because all of the systems that were available were kind of black box technology. So it would it would spit out a reading at the end, but you couldn't really get to the calculations of what was going on. And it was very difficult to see how, when you made certain changes, it seemed to make a big difference, and yet you made others and you couldn't see where that difference was coming from. So we got together with the boy genius Tristan Lee, who's been mentioned already today, from OpenEnergyMonitor, and with Urbed, who are an architect's practice. And we basically developed an open source version of the SAP calculation tool. And then we added lots of additional features onto it, which were things that talked about what people's actual desires were for their home. So it talked about what was important to them in terms of how they liked to live their lives, what rooms they used most, asked questions about were there unused areas of their homes, to actually look at how people use their houses. So so this is available online, this tool. Please do go and try it out at myhome.carbon.coop. And it's free and open source. There is quite a lot of data entry in it, so it isn't something that a lot of people will want to do necessarily all themselves or all in one go. But basically it takes all of the measures in your home, and all of the elements in your home, so your doors, your windows, what your walls are made of, all this kind of stuff, and then tells you what's the best thing that you can do with your money to reduce your bills and make your homes more comfortable. So another reason for me that this is really important is because basically your home is the most expensive thing that you'll ever buy, and you've no idea how it works. So and when we went around and talked to people about and tried to do these sort of assessments, people, I mean, you can tell if you've got double glazing. You might even be able to hazard a guess as to what the gap is, but do you know if it's argon filled or if it's low E glass? Well, 100% of all the people we spoke to didn't know that, and they went with whatever the salesman advised at the time, but they had no record of what had happened. So one of the things which is important about this is somewhere where you can maintain all this information, so that you know what boiler you've got, when it was installed, the kind of information that we kind of need on when things go wrong. So it's a bit like having a logbook for your car. So it's not necessarily that you need to understand what difference it makes having an argon filled window any more than you know what really happens when your big end goes. But if you know someone who does know, then that's a more powerful position to be in. And you can talk to a number of different professionals and make sure that you're getting the best advice and that you know what you're talking about. So, also to say, I've lived in the house I live in at the moment for 14 years, and the alcove in the corner, I think I've measured probably 15 times in that time. So the idea that you have that measurement, so when you're in the charity shop and you see that fantastic sideboard and you think, wonder if that would fit in my, then you can just go on your phone and find out how big that space is. But anyway, that's an aside. So basically, because there are a number of different approaches to how you might go about a house retrofit. Some people are very keen on controlling the air systems so that you can control temperature and humidity within the house via electronic fans and that kind of thing. Other people prefer kind of passive stack ventilation. All this, there's a whole range of different approaches. And what this enables you to do is to compare different people's suggestions and recommendations or make your own kind of DIY style versions. And it will tell you exactly what impact that would have. And the second thing is knowing whether it has worked. So here we've got Tristan and Glyn from the OpenEnergyMonitor. So one of the things which I was challenged with was monitoring after the fact. So, and that's not just monitoring energy use. This is quite an important factor, is that when you're making such huge changes to a house, what impact does that have? What impact does that have on the humidity levels in the house, for example? If you super insulate an area, does that mean that you're getting unhealthy levels of moisture in certain places? Does it mean potentially that you're getting a dew point on a joist somewhere? Or, you know, because we're making really major changes, we could cause problems in people's homes. So we need to be really conscious of that. So and when we looked on the market, there was no system that was kind of modular enough that provided us the ability to measure a whole range of different things that we needed to measure. So we went to OpenEnergyMonitor and we worked with them on implementing their kit in our homes. So when we first did that, their kit looked like this. So we've got the venerable Raspberry Pi here, and also bits of Arduino kit that are used for sensors. And these all needed assembling by hand with a soldering iron, which is fantastic fun to do one of, a bit less so to do 10 of, to do 20 of, to do. But actually what we found was that there was a whole range of people in Manchester who were really keen to build one. So we held some build days, which were full. So we got all of our stuff built by people who were just interested and wanted to learn. We had people, you know, bringing the kids along and all this kind of stuff. It was a really, it was quite surprising how people responded. And we then after that held one for people to make their own, because people were like, well, actually, can I build one? And we now hold a monthly meetup in Mad Lab in Manchester, which is free and open to anyone who wants to come and talk about such things. That's the next one. I'll try and plug it again later. So that's what my phone looks like on its side. So when I'm on the bus and I think, did I leave the iron on? That's not a convincing story, is it? I know when you look at me. But anyway, but, you know, my hair straighteners. Did I leave my hair straighteners on? And, you know, and you can tell immediately whether you have or not. So, so this will give me a kind of idea about, so this is how much power I'm using on a daily basis. You can also do it in months and years. And because everyone's always saying you've got to cut your 10% or you've got to cut your 20%, but from what? How many kilowatt hours do you use a day? Anyone got any idea? It's like, you see, so it's about having this information. It's about being able to, when we talk about an energy descent, I mean, I think that's the thing which is so fascinating about today, in that I haven't talked about climate change at all, because I'm assuming that we're all, you know, rational, evidence-based people, and we understand that it's a major issue. But I mean, I think it's the biggest challenge that our species has ever faced, essentially, to entirely reimagine our economy and our lives and the way that we deal with everything, which also makes it really exciting, and which is why all the stuff that we do is open source, because it's a really big job, and we can't be working away on little bits which are hidden behind IP walls. Basically, we need to be sharing as much of this information as possible, so that we can make change and make it within the time frame that we have available. So This is an area that we're looking at increasingly, the prosumer, as they call them. So people who are not just consumers, but also produce their own energy. So this was taken last night, hence the solar being a little bit low. But you can see this kind of energy, the blue is the energy use, and the yellow is the energy production. And one of the major things is that you're not necessarily using the energy when it's being produced and when it's available. So our householders wanted to look at, well, how do I make sure that I best use the energy that I'm producing? And that took us on to, how could you not save the world with that as your logo? But took us on to the Horizon 2020 program, which is looking at smart grids, and in particular community smart grids, and looking at whether there is an area where trusted entities like cooperatives or public sector institutions might have more of an in than, say, the big six have in terms of the ability to turn on and off things in people's homes, for example. So what we're doing as part of this project is installing a smart grid in Manchester. Although if there were interested people, we could probably extend a few down the valley a bit, which will look at saving energy, reducing bills, all that kind of stuff, but which will provide tools for people all across the system, basically, so that we're not just looking at what householders need or what the national grid providers need, or so we're not just talking to Electricity Northwest or to individual homeowners, but we're looking at everything that everyone needs to make this work as a system. So as has been mentioned already, the issue of blackouts. Belgium has had blackouts much more recently than we have. They're one of the partners in this project. So, the group that's working with us on this is a group called EcoPower, who provide green electricity in a similar way to a company like Good Energy or Ecotricity do here. And they, when they were faced with the worst of the winter blackouts, they had forward knowledge that they weren't going to have sufficient energy to deal with the peak that was coming. And they just sent out a tweet saying, if anyone can turn anything off between these hours, then that would be really useful. And I think they knocked something like 4% off peak or something like that. But those kind of changes are enough to just tide you over. So it's about looking at whether there are ways in the UK market where we're not able to pass savings on to consumers in the same way that they are in other countries in Europe. Whether we're able to whether knowledge will empower people to have a sense of collective responsibility for keeping the lights on. So this is our energy production. So you've got wind here at the bottom and you've got consumption here at the top. And there's long been this idea that, well, we just increase all these and then that's going to solve the problem. We need more wind farms and we need more PV and all this kind of stuff, which is all true, and we do definitely need those things. But it doesn't solve the problem. So this is the vision of 2050 that that Centre for Alternative Technology came up with in their Zero Carbon Britain report. And basically that looks at really incredibly ambitious things where we're going to build huge amounts of wind turbines and put PVs on every roof, and much more than anyone's actually suggesting. It assumes incredible advances in battery storage. It includes filling quite a lot of the Welsh valleys with water for pump storage, and in the same way that Norway is currently doing. But we still end up with these red points, which is where there isn't enough supply to meet the demand, basically. And that's when the lights go out. And we also have these areas where we've got a big overgeneration of power because it's sunny and windy at the same time. So which can actually cause significant issues for the grid. So you get to a point where, as an environmentalist, having shouted all my life about using less energy, and actually there are times when using less energy can be damaging to the grid. So you'll be doing your bit by using more, which is really something which took me a little while to get my head around. So this is the impact that this is having in Germany at the moment. If anyone, Germany is really worth looking into in terms of what they've done with this energy vendor thing, in terms of having a kind of national infrastructure which is very diversified and localized. And what's happened here is this is energy prices. So they're kind of hovering here around about 10 euros a megawatt hour, which seems quite cheap when you think what we pay for it, but hey. But here you've got it going down below this line. So this is negative energy pricing. So for these 6-7 hours on this afternoon, you could be being paid up to 60 euros a megawatt hour for using power, which is kind of crazy, isn't it? So the way that this has worked in Germany is that they pay kind of factories and these kind of things to do particularly energy-intensive things during these times, and they incentivize that with negative energy pricing in order to keep the grid balanced. So one of the things which would be interesting from our point of view, in terms of what was being talked about that Damon spoke about, this idea of aggregating demand together, is, well, couldn't that equally be used to provide heating for social housing, or couldn't this be a solution to fuel poverty, which is very much the other side of the coin that we're looking at here. So it's about trying to come up with systems which involve everyone along that chain. So as part of the project, we've got district network operators, and we've got power sellers, and we've got end users. So we represent the end users. This is Alginet, which is a co-op in Spain, and they actually provide all of the kind of cabling. And basically that was set up by a co-op because at the time in the 30s, there was no money in providing electricity to rural areas, basically. So people did what they always do in these situations and got together, formed co-ops and did it themselves. So they're a town of 8,000 people, and they have all of their own network. So it's quite an interesting position to be in, to be able to work with all these different agencies across different levels. And one of the ideas is that these, as trusted organizations that are owned by their membership, is there something particular about that in terms of the way that people respond to demand response in their homes? So this is where we get into the big plan. So this is, so who here has got a smart meter just as in their home? Anyone? Who here believes that there's going to be smart meters in every home by 2020? Not going to happen, not going to happen. So one of the issues around smart metering is that around about half of the meters that have already been installed in the UK are not going to work with the network and are going to have to be replaced. The whole thing is tremendously costly, and lots of people have got smart meters, but they can't actually access the data. So the data is accessible by their utility provider, but not by them. We've also got something which these meters, which you expect to put in somewhere, and you expect them to be there for like 20 years, without needing to be changed, because the cost of doing that is immense. So the idea with this is that rather than trying to put something in place which is going to be able to interact with your boiler and interact with all of your systems and be like accessible from your mobile phone and all this kind of stuff, is that you have a very simple metrology meter, which just means a billing meter, basically. It's just the thing that they can send you the bill with. And that's all they need access to. And then everything else is on your side, so you control this. So this is particularly important when you're looking at a European level. We have a fairly lax attitude towards privacy in the UK, but countries, particularly former Soviet bloc countries, are much more protective about their personal data. Read into that what you will. But so in Romania, for example, you can't, the energy company has no right to any more kind of granular information than every 24 hours on your energy use, which means that they're no use for responding to, Damon's incident where, a coal-fired power station goes down, because they don't know what you're using and they don't know how to interact with you or to see whether you've responded to what they're requesting, which is where we have this element. So this is where you have your home energy management system, which will interact in much the same way as Damon's system does, dealing with a number of things within your home. So that might be looking at your PV panels, looking at your storage. We've got some of those for the system. Looking at heat pumps, because one of the things when we look at these things is we think, oh well, we'll be fine. We've done quite a lot of reducing energy usage in the UK. But the problem is we're going to get rid of gas. We're going to replace transportation with electric vehicles, and then our headaches multiply. So these kind of green measures that we take are going to cause us more problems. So we need to be able to. So a similar thing to Damon talks about with being able to turn your boiler off. Exactly the same thing with heat pumps. So heat pumps are really popular at the moment in social housing. They are being installed because social landlords want to remove gas from the equation because it solves a lot of headaches. They don't have to visit as often, all that kind of stuff. But the problem is that, well, they're not always properly installed, and they're not always, people are not always properly educated about the best ways of using them. So you get these kind of panorama shock programs about, social housing residents who have a £1,500 bill and all this kind of stuff. So there's a real opportunity here to kind of to come in, do some monitoring, ensure that these things are working correctly, monitoring what the best ways of using them are, and also working on the side of social tenants who've had things improperly installed, basically, and who are kind of paying the price for that. So I actually took about 2/3 of the items off this slide, just to give you an idea of how horrendous it was before. Sorry that it's slightly complicated. So yeah, so basically just to say that do use these tools. This in terms of the Zero Carbon Britain work, which Tristan has done with CAT, and equally the kind of the hacks that have been done on DEC's own 2050 calculator are really fascinating stuff and allow you to kind of try out all of these systems and see what will work. So when someone down the pub says to you, oh, we just need to grow some green algae and that will solve it, then you can tell them, well, you can check out and see what the what the answer is. Yeah, that's what we do. Thank you very much.
Very good, thank you.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's worse than you're saying.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Any questions for Matt? Gentleman over there.
I'm just wondering, how do you ensure the ongoing engagement of the community of people involved in the project? Because even if you ask in this room where people are fairly knowledgeable, almost none of us know how much we consume. So I'm just wondering, how's that part of the project going?
Pretty well, actually. In terms of what you tend to find is that when you install an energy monitor in someone's house, most people will have seen the kind of owl energy monitors and that kind of stuff. So they normally get about a 7% reduction in energy in the first year when people are like, oh, I wonder what's using that. And people work out what it is in their homes that's using the power, but often you get that will start to go up again, basically. And you even get, there have been various interesting sociological things on the kickback that comes from the kind of the male head of family who tells all the kids and not to use energy, and then you get an actual increase in their resistance to that. But what we found is that you need to look at things like comparing people. So you need to be able to see how you compare with other users, how you compare with other people in your neighborhood. You need to look at competitions as well, gamification and that sort of thing. So obviously we're a cooperative, but competition can also be useful. And it comes down to because Damon does know how much energy he uses a day, but it's about knowing whether that's good or bad, or is that better than last year, or is that things where we can start to socialize these things, to encourage people to think about energy in their communities and how those things relate together. So
I'm going to butt in again. Some research seems to currently say that actually giving people competition sometimes actually makes low energy users increase their energy. What you want to do is social norming and say the most successful sentence ever is apparently something formulated like most people around you are taking energy saving moves every day.
yeah,
And that makes everyone reduce things.
yeah,
So if gamification works only for certain people,
Mhm.
young white males generally, certain type of people, but everyone, if you say that the social norm
Mm.
is to be careful and use less than X a day, people will go that way.
exactly. Because
Asymmetric messaging.
so trying to socialize it rather than making it a monetary
Yes.
factor, because most of the time you're saving go and turn your shower off now and you're saving half a penny, or you're saving, so the financial savings are not sufficient and probably won't be sufficient for a long period of time. So we need to look at other ways of making that change and making it stick.
Smashing, thank you. Another question? Always round.
So I'm a bit of a different angle, but I was just thinking about the steel industry that's in trouble at the moment, and I was thinking they must use a lot of energy, and I was wondering what impact that will have when that's mothballed, if that industry folds, and how we can help that industry in, I don't know, energy.
Yeah, there are certainly examples like in Germany where you could potentially subsidize heavy power using industries by promoting them to use energy when it's at its most efficient to do so, and that will become increasingly an issue as we get more and more renewables coming online. But one of the problems, as far as my limited understanding goes, is that most of the kind of certainly in the case of things like aluminium smelting, they're very costly to turn on and off, so I think they need to be kept fairly consistent, but it's kind of out of my area a bit. Yeah.
That was actually interesting, because it turns out you can use so conventionally you're right, and it's terribly expensive to start it up. But the latest thing I was hearing was actually you can use that alumina as a big aluminium battery, and so you can turn it around and actually use it as storage. So it's bizarre, but it just seems one of the things which looked like it's going to do right.
Yeah,
now
yeah.
looks like part of the solution.
Yeah,
But that's as far as my understanding.
yeah, all the tools in the box.
I had a question. I really liked that you focused on the prevention aspect also in terms of the insulation in the home. That's something I know previously there were government initiatives to support people from social housing getting that, but then things have changed in that. Do you know what's the latest in that area in terms of people, Green Deal?
Well, the Green Deal's been scrapped completely. The 10 houses that we did to an 80% cut that I was talking about at the beginning were a thing called Green Deal Go Early, which kind of identified a number of issues that there might be and that there were with Green Deal. So yeah, there's no Green Deal. There is the FITs are all being changed for wind and for solar. So there are some fairly significant changes happening. Certainly in the community energy field, things are not looking particularly positive. But I mean, there were some very interesting things going on in terms of like in Spain, they've never had this, for example. In Spain, it's very, very costly to attach solar to the grid. You have to pay the provider, and there's no fit, and the payments are terrible. But there's now quite a successful campaign, like a crowdfunding campaign, that basically says this isn't economically viable, so you will essentially lose your money. But please invest in us because we need to do it. And that kind of citizen-led thing, which kind of embarrasses the government into, if you're going to set these targets where you're going to, enshrine in law an 80% cut in carbon, then we need to look at, well, how's that actually going to happen?
Interesting. Any more questions from Matt? No? Well, that's wonderful, Matt. Thank you
right.
very much
Thank
indeed.
you very much.
Cheers. Thank you.